Welcome to Tabletop Talks number 9, and we're going to call this Firing Guns at Infantry. So I guess this builds on Tabletop's talk number 2, which was kind of all about guns, but we played a scenario in that one. Here we're just going to be explaining the rules of how guns fire at infantry. I was just going to do firing guns. It's just such a big topic, so we'll go on and we'll do that in like a subsequent sessions. So the video is for new and nearly new players. Maybe a more experienced player will get something out of it as a kind of a rerun of the basic rules, which I'm sure they already know pretty well. But, you may or may not get something out of it. That's your decision. If you do watch it, I hope you enjoy it. If you do watch it and you notice that I've made mistakes, please make comments so that other people are aware of those mistakes, and newer players the same. Of course, you're likely to make spot if I'm making mistakes as well. But also feel free to ask questions in the comments. There's actually 3 ways that a gun can fire. If you actually have a look up here, you can see them. There's the vehicle target type, which is the method by which guns target vehicles. Infantry target type, which is really the one we're going to be looking at today. An area target type, which is another way that guns can target infantry, but we're not going to be doing that. We're just going to be focusing on infantry target type. There's quite a lot to cover, so I guess I need to get started. So a gun, defined by the rulebook, is one of these larger counters, which is not a vehicle, basically. So you can see a piece of ordnance on a larger counter. Now there are support weapons that use similar rules. They're called support weapons. They're not called guns, but at some point in the future we'll cover those as well. So there are basically 3 stages in the process. The first is to see if the gun is able to hit a unit when it fires at it. The second is to find out what the effect of that hit is, assuming there is a hit. And then the consequence of that. Now, so that'll make sense, I think, in a moment. So the first thing to do, let's say we're going to take a shot from this infantry gun here. Okay. Let's say for the sake of argument, this is going to be a prep fire shot. I'm going to just put it to the side for a moment so that we can see what we're doing. So let's just say that that's what we're doing. We're taking a shot from this infantry gun at this Russian squad in L4. So the first thing we need to do is we need to identify what is the to-hit number when this gun fires at this infantry unit. Now there's a range of 1, 2. So we have a look on here, this to-hit table. I don't know how big this is going to be on your screen. It might be worth getting your to-hit table out, pausing here, getting your to-hit tables out, and having a look at this as I talk it through. But basically, infantry target type, 0 to 6 hex range is an 8 to-hit number for all nationalities. Now, some nationalities use red to hit numbers, some use black to hit numbers. The Germans always use black. In any case, for most of the shots we're looking at today, they're the same. You need to have a look at national capabilities chart when you begin a scenario with a nationality that you're not particularly familiar with. Russians, for example, use red to hit numbers, and red to hit numbers are sometimes the same, but are much more commonly, it's more difficult for them to hit that. So it's going to be 8. That's our number, 8 to hit. Okay, I'm going to make a note of that just so that I don't forget, because I now want to talk about another idea. With infantry target type, there's always the possibility of a critical hit. Now, a critical hit is if you roll less than half the to-hit number. So if I rolled a 4, that wouldn't be less than half. So 3 is my critical hit number. So a good way to think about this shot is that there are actually 2 hit numbers, 8 and 3. And I'm obviously going to roll 2 dice in a moment to find out whether I get a hit. But of course there are going to be modifiers, and those modifiers apply to either of those to hit numbers, if that makes sense. Okay, so people do find the fire-based hit determination die roll modifiers and the target-based hit determination die roll modifiers confusing at first. I've got the table up here. We're going to go through them. So we need an 8 or a 3, albeit obviously 3 is going to be very, very unlikely for us to get a hit for. Let's look at the target, the fire-based hit determination modifiers first. Now there are lots here. Most of them apply to vehicles firing, or a lot of them apply to vehicles firing. So we're firing just at infantry actually simplifies this process just a little bit. So the first is firing outside our covered hex spine. So if we're firing outside the covered arc, we'll have a look at that in a moment, then we need to turn the gun. And each hex spine that the gun gets turned, there's going to be a cost. And the cost is, with T, which means it's turreted, like this anti-aircraft gun here, it would only cost 1 for each hex spine turn. 1 for the first one, 1 for the second one, 1 for the third one. For a slow turret traverse, which I think is like the box instead of the circle, costs 2 for the first movement, the first hex spine turn, and then 1 for each thereafter. And guns that are not turreted at all, like our infantry gun here, it costs 3 for the first, and then it's 1 thereafter. All of those numbers are doubled if it's in a building or woods or rubble. So that's the first. That going to count for ours, because actually our infantry gun is going to have to turn to take its shot, and it is in a woods hex. All of the B, actually no, firing and advancing fire phase is plus 2. All of these C ones, C1, 2, 3 and 4 really apply to vehicles moving, so we're not going to look at those today. Motion, non-stop firing, that's one of the C ones that applies. D is pinned. So if our crew becomes pinned at some point before it takes its shot, we need to add 2 to add to hit. Interesting one is firing within your own hex. So I suppose this could happen with infantry if they were doing a human wave or berserkers went into your hex. It's harder to hit them once they've actually entered your hex. Intensive fire is when you take a first fire shot, which is like normal. The intensive fire shot is when you take an additional shot to your normal 1 shot per turn. Have to add 2 if we're intensive firing. We're not going to talk about deliberate immobilisation because that's when we're firing at guns. Captured or non-qualified infantry, plus 2 for each. So captured is if obviously the Germans lose control of one of these guns and the Russians are firing it, then it is a captured weapon. So there's plus 2 to there to hit. And non-qualified is, well, these crews are qualified. Can't see that there, can you? But the crew counters are basically specially trained, I guess, to fire these weapons. If you take control with, perhaps the crew gets destroyed and you take control with an ordinary infantry unit, then they have to add 2 to there to hit. Buttoned up doesn't count. Okay, the only one perhaps here that really might count here is CX and perhaps encircled. I think pretty much everything else is kind of quite, it doesn't really apply when you're firing an infantry. So it's just about possible. I can't think of why, but I guess it's possible for a crew to be CX when it tries to fire. Encircled, of course, it's possible for the crew to be encircled. So there's quite a few there. But if we look at our shot here, let's move this to one side for a second. It's always best to look at the counter that's firing first. Okay, so we're firing at this unit in L4. So the first thing that we need to say is that it's going to have to turn counterclockwise 1 hex. And this doesn't have a turret. So we know that normally costs 3. But because it's in a woods, that's going to cost us 6. So we're now looking at 8 or 3 plus 6 for this shot. What I generally do then is I just sort of follow the line from the firer to the target. Are there any things in between? Is it going to go through some grain or through some smoke or a wreck? Looking at the hindrance modifiers. Let's bring my table back up. And then we look at the target-based hit determination die roll modifiers. So dashing infantry is J. Dashing infantry would be plus 2 to make it a little bit more difficult to hit because they're dashing. The rest of J pretty much all apply to J1 and J2 apply to vehicles moving. Obviously, we're not a vehicle moving. We're not looking at that today. But J3/4 does apply. So this doesn't apply in the prep fire phase because we're imagining this is a prep fire phase shot. But if this was in defensive first fire and it was reacting to movement, then they do get the FFNAM and FFMO, first fire non-assault movement, first fire movement in the open. And you can have both of those, of course. So potentially, if this was defensive fire and this Russian squad was moving to L3 and it was a non-assault move, then we would get -2 for that shot. Let's put that back. Let's bring this back. I really haven't got this very well set up. Okay, so +6. The next thing is it concealed? So we're not concealed, but if this was concealed, it would be another +2. Point blank range is quite important, so if we are within 2 hex range, then we get a -1. Well, we are within 2 hex range, so we have a -1 there. And if we are in point blank range, as in like just 1 hex away, then it is -2. Acquired target is important, so we're taking kind of our first shot at this target, but if whether we hit or we miss, we're going to be able to put an acquired target down, and that makes it that'll be -1 to subsequent shots at that same target. And each time we fire, that goes up to a maximum of -2. TEM is the next important one. So obviously we're in the Russians are in a wooden building here, so they're going to get a +2 to their TEM. So that's a modifier. It's going to make it even harder for us to hit. So in fact, we got +6 for the turn, -1 for range, +2 for the wooden building. So in total, we've got +7. So as you can see, we're very, very unlikely to hit this target, but we will get acquisition, so that it will be easier to hit next time. And the next time we take a shot at that target, we won't have to turn our covered arc, so we will lose that +6. And all of a sudden, this is going to be, well, with an acquisition, it would actually be the next shot at this target will be an 8 to hit. We'll have a look at that. We'll go through that process so we can see that actually happening. So we're going to declare the shot. First thing is to check we've got line of sight. Well, we've straight down this hex spine, so of course we have. We're turning, so that's going to cost us 6. A 1 less because of the range, that's +5. Another 2 in there, so it's 8 or 3 +7. Roll the dice. And we rolled 3, add 7 to that, and it's above 8, so it's a miss. But we do get this acquisition counter on there, and I'll label that infantry gun so that we remember what that is. Right, so we actually kept rate of fire. So we've got a rate of fire number here of 2. When a non-vehicular, non-turreted gun turns, its rate of fire goes down 1. It's called its conditional rate of fire. So in fact, I've only got a rate of fire of 1 as I turn, though normally I have a rate of fire of 2. Now I only rolled a 1 in that attack, so actually I do keep rate of fire. So I can actually attack again, not as intensive fire as then, just as a normal shot. Now look how much more likely I am now to hit. It's still going to be 8 to hit, but now I've got to, I'm subtracting 1 for rate. I've got no modifiers to the firer. I'm going to -1 for the range, -1 for the acquisition, +2 for the wooden building TEM protection. So you can see really it's an 8 flat or a 3. So if I rolled a 3 again, like I did last time, this would be a critical hit. 8 or less, and it's a hit. So let's have a look, see what we roll. We've rolled an 8, which is a hit. So we're now moving on to that second part of the process. What damage are we actually going to do? So we're going to have to go to IFT table. So when guns hit infantry, you have to look at the IFT table, and you have to find the caliber of the gun that's fired, which is 75, and then where you've got the millimetre line, you go along and you find the one that fits. Now it's always rounded down, so we're a 75mm gun, we can't roll on the 80 table, we go down to the 70 table. So we're rolling on this column here. Roll 2 dice. IFT, we've rolled an 8, and I don't know why it does that. So on an 8, on the 12 is a 1 morale check, and then we move to the final phase, the part of this. Oh, by the way, this goes to this flips. Now lost rate of fire, so he's definitely prep fired now. This guy here has got to take a 1 morale check, and he, okay, well, we're not looking at heat of battle and all that stuff today, but he passes it, okay. And that's the basic process of hitting. Okay, so that's the basic to hit process, going right the way through to resolving the effects of the shot. But there's a few other things that I wanted to look at. The next is I just want to look at the ordnance to hit table in a little bit more detail. So I've got some examples here. So we were looking at the range, and it was very, very simple. We simply looked down, like infantry at this range, it's an 8. It's just a little bit more complicated than that. So for example, this gun is a starred gun, a 75 star. And you can see here, gun and ammo basic to hit number modifications. So if I am a starred gun, 0 to 6, you can see that being a starred gun makes no difference to my 8 to hit number, nor 7 to 12. But at 13 to 18 hex range, my to hit number actually goes down if I'm a starred gun. Now the starred gun here, this range would be, so this range it would be 6. But because I'm a starred gun at 13 hexes and beyond, it's actually only a 5 to hit number. If I was a long barrel gun like this one here, it actually goes up. So starred guns become less accurate the further away they are. But L weapons, as you can see, become more accurate the further away they are. And of course you've got double L guns, which can be much, much more accurate other guns that you might be firing. As you go on, and later on you'll also know if you're using APCR and against guns, against tanks, this becomes much, much less effective. It's very, very effective once it's hit, but much less effective at hitting long range than an ordinary anti-tank round. But anyway, that's for a different session. So you need to just double check those things. Generally speaking, up to about 12 hexes, you don't need to worry too much about this, except for an area fire smoke attack. All guns are going to be using these basic to hit numbers. But if you've got an L number or a starred number and it's firing a bit further than that, 13 hexes or above, that modifies the to hit number. Okay, so let's take a few other shots and see what's happening here. So here's let's say we're going to take a shot from this anti-aircraft gun here, and we're going to fire at this gun, this guy up in the building here. I guess the first thing would be to check that we got a line of sight, and we have indeed got a line of sight. We're not affected by the grain because this defending unit is on level 1. But we will have to turn. But remember, this is a fast turret traverse. It only costs 1 to turn this gun. So that would cost us 1, doubled because we're in a woods, building or rubble. So in fact, I'm going to need to be +2. It's within 6 hexes, so it's 8 base to hit. So it's 8 and 3 for a critical hit. But I'm going to add 2 for the turn, 3 for the building, so that's +5 in total. 8 or 3 +5 to hit. Malfunction of the gun. Okay, that would be the end of that for now. But there's just seeing how they're a little bit more. That initial chance of hitting is much, much better with a fast turret like that. So this is a more interesting situation. So this anti-tank gun here is going to take a shot at these guys down here. So we can do a line of sight check because the shot's been declared. We're firing over these hedges, over this wall, straight into there because we're at level 2. We're firing straight over those. So there's no question about us being able to see it. What's a bit difficult for this gun is it has an underscored main armament. And if the main armament is underscored, that means that it has no high explosive. So the assumption is that when you're firing guns armed with high explosive at infantry, the assumption is that you're firing HE when you're firing at tanks. The assumption is that you're firing anti-tank if that's available. Now, actually, this gun here has an overscored ordnance symbol. That means that it doesn't have anti-tank. So if there were tanks in this, it wouldn't be able to fire anti-tank at them. It would have to fire HE at them. So what this basically means is that here we can't fire a high explosive round, and there's some differences in the way that this like sort of plays out. The to hit process is the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's within 6 hexes, so we can remember that's 8 or 3 on the to hit table. So to hit, we would roll it. What are we adding? 1. Okay, the gun doesn't have to turn. We only need to add 1 for the TEM. To hit, 5, add 1 is 6, so that's a hit. When you're firing anti-tank, because there isn't really the same kind of explosive power, it's always resolved either on the 1 or the 2 column on the infantry fire table. So I'm trying to find the high explosive equivalency table on Vassal, and I can't find it, but I can find it. I can find it here on my RAT charts. It's here, C 8.31, and it tells you the high explosive equivalency of these armour AP shots. So basically, if the ordnance is less than 37 millimeters, then the hit is resolved on the 1 IFE table. If it is greater than 37 millimeters, then it is resolved on the 2 column. And it doesn't matter how big the calibre of that anti-tank gun is, it won't ever be more than 2 on the IFT table. So we got our hit. So we're on the 2 table. We rolled a 7 on the 2 table. That will be a no effect, but I did keep rate of fire. So we ought to have one of these little chaps on there. Okay, and I'll label that anti-tank. Okay, taking another shot. Now this time it's still 8 to hit. It's +1 for the woods, and it's -1 for the acquisition. So take that shot to hit, and that would be a 9. So that would be a miss, and it lost rate of fire. I just want to imagine that instead of that we'd rolled a 3. Can't get it to roll a 3, can I? You can never get a 3 when you want one. No. Okay, let's leave it there. Let's imagine that we rolled a 3. So after modification, so it was a +1 and a -1. So if I'd rolled a 3, that would have been a critical hit. And what happens is that the caliber gets the column of the IFT gets doubled. So instead of 2, it becomes a 4 column shot, and you've got a -1. So normally the hit, once you get the hit, there's no protection from the TEM. The TEM protects you from being hit, doesn't it? Afterwards, it doesn't make any difference. In the case of a critical hit, it actually gets reversed as a part of the effects dice roll. So we would now have a 4 -1, which is still no effect, I think, but was much more likely to have an effect than an ordinary hit. Okay. Feel free to post questions. We will be coming back to this because we'll be coming back to have a look at how vehicles fire at tanks. How guns fire at tanks and vice versa. We're also going to be coming back with a session at some point of how infantry fire at crews in manning guns, because that's quite an interesting aspect of the rules at all. Post questions. Feel free to be politely critical if I've got something unclear or you don't think that I got something right. Thanks very much. See you soon. Bye bye.